Welcome to Geopolitics Demystified. I'm your host, S.L. Canton. Today we have a fascinating guest who's a veteran war correspondent. So we'll talk to him about what does it mean to be a war correspondent, and if he has had a chance to be in the center of the actions. And then we'll spend a lot of time talking about the Middle East war and if there's going to be a huge uh, regional war starting with Lebanon and Israel. So, welcome, Adelaja Magnier.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elijah. So, this is the first time we've had a war correspondent in our show. So can you tell us a little bit about what does it mean to be a war correspondent? So are you there when there are bullets and bombs flying? Why did you decide to be a war correspondent? And just your like a brief summary of your journalism experience.
My first assignment was in 1982 during the Israeli invasion to Lebanon. And I did not have any experience as a war correspondent, really. And this is when I traveled to Lebanon to cover the news, and I was faced with many challenges. I've seen many colleagues from all walks of life, Italian, French, Americans, just doing an excellent job and being in the middle of the war. But I also have seen others dropping their camera and giving up, or others getting drunk in the morning so they can cope with what they see during the day. Being a war correspondent is not an easy life because that leaves marks for the rest of your life. We are human beings after all, and we feel like everybody else. But there are possibilities to disconnect during the job and to create kind of compartment in one's head. So to focus on the work without meaning that this is something that we can do all the time, because we have feelings and we are moved by what we see, and we suffer with people who suffer, depending if you sit in a very nice hotel, which I did not have the luxury, but I lived always in flats. I had no electricity like everybody else. I needed to look for food like everybody else. I needed to heat up the water to have a clean water, or sometimes eat expired tins and get poisons many times. I've been arrested many times by militia, non-state actors, thrown in their jail for many days, and then they give up on leaving me there, and they release me. Being wounded a couple of times by car bombs, explosion, snipers, all that. And every time, every assignment, I said, this is the last time. And I kept saying it for 35 years. And it was never been the last time.
Wow.
So the area that I covered mainly is, as I said, the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the Iran-Iraq War, the Lebanese Civil War, the Gulf War in 1991, the 1992-1996 war in the former Yugoslavia. I was in Sarajevo, where the city was surrounded for a long time. The second and the third war in Lebanon, we're talking about the 2006 war, the 2001 war in Afghanistan, 2011 war in Libya, and then in Syria, 2011, 2019. And then in 2003, the war in Iraq, when I lived for many years there in the country. So that's more or less my life, and I'm leaving to Lebanon on Monday again to cover this war if possible.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean, do you represent some major news organizations, or do you do it on your own as a freelance?
No, I work for many organizations like the Italian news agency ANSA, EFE, the Spanish news agency. I work for La Repubblica in Italy, Panorama. I work for the European newspaper in the UK, Arai in Kuwait. I worked for many newspapers and organization, and now I have my own blog also in different languages where people subscribe to get the latest information and analysis.
Wow. Wow. So, okay. So, I mean, so aren't you scared of dying in the war?
Always, I'm afraid, but not afraid of dying, afraid of getting injured, but not during the day. At the end of the day, during the day, it's difficult to be afraid and do this job. But at the end of the day, thinking what I have done and where I have been, and I said, I must be completely off my head and now I won't do it again. But then you wake up and then you forget and you start all over again doing exactly the same thing.
Wow. And so, what is the? I mean, so do you take positions? Like, do you have, So when there is a conflict, do you have like a side? Like, do you say, okay, so I support this group, or do you would try to be totally neutral and objective?
There's no journalist who can be neutral. We are truthful. We can report what's happening, but we can also report more about those who are more oppressed. It is impossible to cover a war on Gaza and be on the side of the killers and those considered by the international laws as war criminals. That we can report what the Israelis are saying, but we can't stand with Israel, for example. We cannot stand against the resistance in any country, as according to the United Nations, the resistance has the legal right to defend itself, even armed itself and protect itself against the occupiers. These are international laws that someone like me cannot and will not ignore, even at the cost of the well-being, which is something that I paid dearly and I do not regret it, for going against the policy of a newspaper, because the options are two. Either you write what the policy of the newspaper or the agency is, or you take the door and then you look for another job. I think the second option makes you really sleep very quickly, and you can have a very good hours of sleep every single night. It won't give you a lot of money, but at least you have this luxury that many people don't have.
Yeah. Do you just write, or do you also take photos and videos?
No, these photos and video is just personal, but I only write. I'm not a photographer.
Okay. Okay. So, what is the most memorable experience that you could share with us as a war correspondent?
Difficulties or
whatever that stands out, so it could be very sorrowful, or it could be very positive and uplifting. So whatever that stands out in your mind.
in the war, there's nothing really uplifting. Everything is very dramatic, and you see people dying in front of you. You walk on bodies. You see people suffering, people not understanding why there is a war. People asking, we've done nothing, why we are killed. And then you are there hopeless, just reporting and hoping to reflect what's happening on the ground so people have the choice to decide where to stand and perhaps do something about it. And I think the most violent war I've seen was in Lebanon, 2006, where there was no point in going to any shelter because every bomb would bring down the entire building. So if you are on the seventh floor or you are on the first floor, it changed nothing. While in other wars, the rockets were smaller and there was more way to be protected depending on which area one can stand in a flat where there are more concrete walls rather than when one is dealing with the Israeli bombs of 500 kilograms. And sometimes actually being on the top roof is much better because the top roof will be completely on the ground and you will not be buried completely under the rubble. That's a kind of sarcasm, but that was the 2006 was really difficult. And the sound of bombs were terrific, difficult to forget. But the suffering was everywhere, was in Sudan, was in Afghanistan, was in Sarajevo, in Bosnia, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Libya a bit less because the war didn't last for very long. But I mean, every war is different.
Mm. Wow. Okay. So, looking at the current situation in Lebanon, and so you have been in the past Lebanese wars. So, what do you think? I mean, is this just the beginning of the ground invasion and bombing? And are we going to see months and months of destruction, or what is happening? And what do they want? What do the Israelis want? What do the Hezbollah and the Lebanese government want?
The way Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is conducting the war in Gaza and in Lebanon is more or less in the same way, with the difference that Gaza is weaker than Lebanon because Gaza is the biggest open-air concentration camp that exists on Earth. And the Palestinian resistance manufacture their weapons locally, with very few coming from the outside, but that's very little. With Lebanon, it's different. They are supported by Iran and Syria. They can manufacture a lot of weapons, but they can also receive weapons from outside. The country is much bigger. Gaza is 364 square kilometers. Lebanon is 10,400 square kilometers. The topography in Gaza is straightforward, flat, while in Lebanon is completely different. This is not a promenade for the Israelis to go into Lebanon. This is why for Benjamin Netanyahu to maintain a kind of upper hand, he needs to continue the aerial campaign and continue bombing Lebanon. But for how long? He has several thousands of objectives. He started with the military capability of Hezbollah, but did not start bombing the officers or the officials of different walks, units that are not involved in this war. And he can do that later on, depending on how he developed the battle and how strong Hezbollah can show Israel to deter the Israeli from expanding the war. Because Benjamin Netanyahu has nothing to do in Gaza anymore. He failed to achieve his objective to free the captives and to defeat Hamas. he will not achieve any objective in Lebanon. But his objective is not to free the prisoners or to defeat Hamas or to defeat Hezbollah. His objective is to stay in power. And for him to remain in power, he is under the blackmail of the far-right minister. He is far-right himself, but he has the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, and the security minister, Itamar Ben-Gvir, who threatened him to resign if he stopped the war on Gaza, and will do exactly the same with Lebanon. Therefore, there is no vision at the end of this tunnel, because Hezbollah as a resistance is supporting the resistance in Palestine and will never accept to separate itself from Palestine, either a ceasefire on all fronts or war on all fronts. This is where we are at today.
So, so is this going to be for a few days or a few weeks or a few months, a few years? What is your prediction?
Yeah, it can be a few months, depending on how, on the size of the pain Hezbollah can inflict on Israel that might turn the population against the prime minister. Now, Benjamin Netanyahu is feeling the victory because he was not hurt enough. And by being hurt, it means the domestic front needs to remain in the shelter for very long. The business stopped, and the vision at the end of the day, lacking of where this war is going and if Hezbollah has been defeated or not. If Hezbollah continue fighting, firing several hundred of rockets and missiles per day, that will put a lot of pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu to enlarge the war. And by enlarging the war, he will start hitting the infrastructure. This will relieve Hezbollah to hit the Israeli infrastructure. And this is where Israel is going to be in trouble.
So you think that the Hezbollah has long, powerful missiles that can actually destroy the major infrastructure in Israel?
Yes, they do. Not as the Israelis, because Israel is supported by the strongest country in the world, the United States of America, and the ammunition is supplied by Germany, France, UK, who also supply Israel with intelligence and with logistic support, with support also on the United Nations, etc. Hezbollah is on its own, supported by Iran, but also by the resistance in Syria and in Iraq. So there is no balance here of power. Nevertheless, Hezbollah, as a non-state actor, can still do a lot against Israel, that has the most powerful army in the Middle East and the 14th army most powerful in the world.
So is it going to be a stalemate again, or is one party going to win?
No, never winners in any war. But there are people who achieve their objectives and others who fail to achieve their objectives. In this case, Israel has failed to achieve its objectives in Gaza, and its objective in Lebanon is the return of all the northern settlers to their homes, and that I can guarantee that Israel will not achieve that by military means, but by negotiation only when the war in Gaza stops.
And as you're looking at Gaza, are the people going to go back to where they used to live? Are we going to see the rebuilding of Gaza, or those places are going to be taken over by the Israelis?
No Israelis would be allowed to live in Gaza. People prefer to live in tents and build their homes slowly but surely, and not to leave. They will not allow the Israelis to live. Nobody can live in a hostile environment. And the Palestinian resistance will not allow the Israeli army to remain there. without being attacked on daily basis. So I don't think the Israeli settlers, have any chance to return to Gaza.
Okay. And what about Beirut? I mean, are they going to spare the heart of Beirut? Or, I mean, are they going to use the same excuses, saying, oh, the Lebanese people are just human shields, and the Hezbollah has but tunnels under the hospital, whatever the excuses that they used in Gaza. Will we see that here as well?
We will always hear these excuses. And for Netanyahu yesterday, he even said that Hezbollah is hiding missiles in the garbage. So people started to look in their rubbish bag if they can find a missile, as Benjamin Netanyahu claimed. Nevertheless, he bombed the suburb of Beirut, but is not sure if he's going to bomb Beirut itself. It depends on how the war is going to develop.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. So, where do you think? Okay, so I mean, is this going to turn into a regional war? Because we remember Wesley Clark, talking about how the neocons wanted to take out 7 countries in 5 years. So, well, is this the final part of that goal that they set 24 years ago?
This plan has failed because they've tried in Iraq, and the Iraqi resistance was born and hit the Americans, and this will force them to leave. They tried to create a failed state in Syria, and they failed, even if they still occupy a third of the country. And they are trying with Lebanon, and they will fail again. So, no, this plan was indeed on the table, as General Wesley Clark said, but then it is no longer feasible. And the Israelis are trying today to reimpose deterrence and control, but it is impossible to fight and win against the resistance anywhere in the world, even if the resistance has what is primitive weapons in comparison to the all-might Israeli forces, the total dominance in the air, because the resistance doesn't have an air force, and the support of the most powerful army in the world, that is the United States, that's supplying Israel with a bridge via air and sea with everything that Israel needs. And yet the resistance is capable of standing against Israel and say, you will not occupy Lebanon and you will not break our will. Exactly what the people in Gaza are saying. And the Israelis, despite all the destruction they have created in Gaza, they have failed.
Wow. So this is so hard for me to understand. So where will the region be 5-10 years from now? I mean, are we still going to be here? I mean, are they going to be fighting and bombing and killing each other? Or do you think there could be some sort of a negotiation, like maybe a Palestine with 2-state solution, something like that? Would that be feasible?
The two-state solution is a mockery. In 1993, there was Oslo I, 1995, Oslo II. In 1999, the Palestinians were supposed to have their own state. And when Yasser Arafat, the head of the PLO, realized that that was a joke, then he supported the Second Intifada. And this is where he lost his life. So the two-state solution is not on the table. The Israelis passed on the law at the Knesset denying a two-state solution. So it's over. With 67 votes of 120, there is no possibility for two-state solutions. Where the Middle East is going, we don't know. We need to see the end of this war and what is going to come out of the clash between Hezbollah and Israel, which is the most important part, because Gaza did this job by standing against Israel. And because of that, we still need to see the final outcome that we are very far from it yet.
So, a lot of people are talking about a multipolar world and the end of the U.S. empire. So, do the Israelis think about the possibility that the U.S. empire is not going to be around sometime in the future?
Well, the way the Israelis are acting, they consider themselves above the law, above everybody, above any other country. They can annex Palestinian territory. They can kill people, demonize them, cut water, electricity, food supply, medicine, invade Lebanon, invade Gaza, invade the West Bank, and get away with it. The International Court of Justice ordered the Israelis to stop the war, and the Israelis did not respond. The International Criminal Court considered Benjamin Netanyahu a war criminal, and yet he's received in New York and in other places around the world. So, in the absence of the international law, the Israelis think that they are above the law. But the beginning of the end of the US hegemony is on track with the Shanghai Cooperation, with the BRICS, with people getting together, the global South, thinking how to detach themselves from the US hegemony and to de-dollarize, dethrone the dollar. So this is very important, but it's a very long process to be achieved.
Yeah. Wow. All right. Thank you so much for your time, Elijah. Where can people find you and follow you?
Well, if you type Elijah Magnier, you will find my blog where you can subscribe. I am very active on X, Twitter, and I would be grateful for any support. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much for your time. It was really very helpful.
My pleasure.